Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I am doing the start of what I think will be a new editing explained video for a new book, Keeping Fire, which is the third book in the Samuel Creed series. The first book is Keeping Creed, the second book is Keeping Strong. This book, Keeping Strong, is just a proof copy because for whatever reason I do not actually have a copy of like the finished final version of Keeping Strong. It's kind of weird. Bird. Like, I publish books, a large reason why I write Bird is because I wanted to have my own books on my shelf, but when I've actually like published books, I tend to not even have copies of my books. So I have like a copy of Syrian Dander, but that is it. That's the only copy of any of my books that I have. This copy of Keeping Creed is actually my mother's copy, which I'm currently borrowing, and Keeping Strong, I don't have any copies. But anyway, that's a tangent. The point is, I don't have copies of my own books, which is just weird. I need to buy copies of my own books. But anyway, today I got this in the mail, which should be book 3 in the Samuel Creed series, Keeping Fire. I'm a little worried this might go wrong because this seems like quite a thin book, and I don't really write many thin books anymore. So I'm wondering, like, did they get the book wrong? Did they send me the wrong book? Or did the book mess up in the printing or something? Because why is this book not bigger? I thought this would be kind of a bigger-ish book, but I compared it to a couple other of my books, like books that I know should be bigger than this one, and it's like not too far off from the size-wise, so maybe this is it. But anyway, this would be the first time I'm editing the book, so this would be like the first time I've actually held this book in my hands. So this would be like working on the fourth draft of the book. I do 7 drafts for each of my books. The first 3 drafts are done on the computer, and that's more like the writing draft. And then I do 4 drafts, the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th draft. What I do is I order a copy of the book, and I edit the book itself with a red pen and then make the corrections into the computer. So for what I do for these editing explained videos is I show you guys the changes I am making to the book and explain why I am making these changes. So this is the first time I will be editing this book, Keeping Fire. All up till this point I've just been writing it, but now the book is in pretty good shape. There are actually a couple scenes that I know I want to add, like, you know, from scratch. Maybe 2, possibly 3 scenes. So those would be like brand new, which I'll, you know, write, you know, sometime. But for now, mostly it'll just be editing. So for the first time editing, I am kind of just going to be trying to make basic changes. Not too detailed stuff. I'm not so worried at this point about like each and every word, like if every single word is the strongest word in each case. More so what I'm looking at is more like from a chapter standpoint is, does every paragraph like have importance for pushing the story along for that chapter, or is it just a nonsensical, you know, paragraph or whatever? Can I cut the paragraph and the story, the scene would still work the exact same? You know, that's kind of the main changes I'm making at this point, kind of broader changes. And with each draft, I'll, you know, get a little bit more in depth and a little bit more picky about each and every word. So at this point, it's just kind of a real rough draft and just beginning to fine tune it and polish it up and getting it closer toward publication. So anyway, the 4th draft of Keeping Fire. Let's open this up and hopefully it is Keeping Fire. It'd be funny if it's some other book. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's see if this is Keeping Fire or not. It is. So this is also the cover reveal. The first time I have held this book. It is definitely Keeping Fire. And it looks all good. All good. So first off, I should say about the cover, this is not the cover like I intended for the book. I had kind of a different idea for the cover. So looking at this cover, like if I was to ask you, what is this book about? You'd probably have no clue. I mean, there's like a tree, so I mean, you could kind of tell by the like scenery that, you know, it kind of looks, you know, kind of like prairie-ish. So you may think like, oh, is this like, you know, a book about like Kansas? Or you might, you know, kind of come to the conclusion that it's Africa. You might think it's Australia. But Anyway, what I wanted to do for the cover was, since in the series each cover has a person on it, so keeping Creed, that's supposed to be Rose holding an ice cream. Keeping Strong, that's supposed to be Eric Strong, like a disabled veteran. And so what I wanted for Keeping Fire was a African girl who is kind of the main subject of the book, and the name Fire actually comes from her because that is part of her name. So I kind of wanted to have an African girl on the cover, but I just really couldn't do that. It wasn't very practical. So I looked at, like, you know, for the cover creator, I used like just, you know, pictures of like Africans, but none of them were anywhere close to what I would have wanted for the cover of this book. So just kind of as a temporary thing, I came up with this cover instead. And I think this will actually probably be the cover I choose. Again, it's not the cover I originally wanted, but I think it is a pretty cover. And so, like, if you look at this book, you know, I think it's good enough where you can look at it and say, ooh, that looks pretty, what's that? And so you pick it up and read the back of the book. And that is really the only goal of a cover, is to get it interesting enough so people are willing to pick it up and look at it. And then they could read the back and then find out what the book is about. So I think it is a good enough cover. I think it's good enough to attract the eye. So basically, I don't even know how I got this cover. I think I just looked like for African pictures, and this is something I saw, and it's just real pretty and colorful and all that. So what I did is I like duplicated the image of the cover of the tree. So I just had like, you know, a mirror image on this side. And so that's like the back of the book, but you can't really see it very well. And yeah. I am sorry I am going to ramble at this point because I'm excited. This is my first time holding the book. So I'm excited. So excuse me, I'm going to ramble. I'm excited. I'm hyper. So just want to talk about the book a little bit. So, you know, I checked with my other covers to try to make it consistent. So, you know, the Sean Holt thing there up at the top. And then the font here, I actually tried to use the exact same type of font as Keeping Strong here. I do not think this is the actual like final cover because I think I remade the cover for the book. So that's not actually the finished cover, I believe. But anyway, so the title there is pretty much the exact same as Keeping Strong's font and all that. And then something I added also is like down at the bottom here, it says book 3 in the Samuel Creed series. Again, I don't have the actual cover here. Maybe I'll try to post it. I guess I'll try to post it. I need to add room for it. I'll try to post the cover there if I can of Keeping Strong, just so you guys can kind of compare it. But anyway. But anyway, something I wanted to do for the books is, I think it's a major annoyance when you pick up a book and you start reading and then you realize, oh, this is actually part of a series. Or even worse than that, you realize, oops, this isn't even book 1 in the series. So since I know that is a problem, like for readers, you know, this is how you know that the book was put together by someone who reads, because like I anticipate these problems. I am well ahead of you. So for the covers, I actually wanted to put book 3 in the Samuel Creed series. So you know, looking at the cover, it's book 3. It says so right there, book 3 in the Samuel Creed series. A lot of books may just say, you know, Keeping Fire, a book in the Samuel Creed series, and it kind of lures readers in because they don't know, oh, this isn't book 1. Then what I've also done, you won't really be able to see it, but right there I have a SC and a number 3, which tells you it's Samuel Creed number 3. And I want to start adding that with all my books. So, you know, if the books are just there on the shelf, you'll be able to see like TK number 1, Trevor Knight number 1, TK number 2, TK number 3, so on and so forth. So that way, like if you're looking for a certain book, you could just look and see like, oh, there's number 3. That's the one I wanted. And also I'm like having it color coordinated, I guess. So like all of the Trevor Knight books, like that little icon there, it's like a diamond. For the Trevor Knight books, it is like orange or amber because Trevor Knight's eyes are amber. So it's kind of like the color for that series, kind of just amber. And so for the Keeping Creed series, or Keeping And so for the Samuel Creed series, it's like a green diamond and Samuel Creed #3. So anyway, I just think that's real cool as well. So that also just lets you know, looking at the book, Samuel Creed or SC #3. Then I thought this would be a brilliant idea, but shortly after I ordered this book, I kind of thought, what about if I had the actual title here on the spine going downwards? So like instead of, you always have to tilt your head to read the title, what if I just flipped it so it reads downwards, keeping fire? And I thought that was a brilliant idea because that way you don't have to tilt your head when you're trying to read. And I mentioned this to the bookstore owner basically that, hey, I'm having this idea about like having the spine go downwards, the title of the spine just be vertical. And right away he was like, nope, don't do that. That's annoying. And I was like, whoa, okay. And he said that he has seen a few books like that and they're just difficult to read. And I did consider that because like, especially for American or English readers, we're not used to reading vertically like that. I mean, like, that's how Chinese letters are, but we're just not used to reading downwards. So I think just the way we read things, it is probably more convenient for us just to tilt our head. And then of course there would also be a problem is, what if the book is on its side? I mean, if it's on its side, you could read it perfectly. But if I have it going vertically, then again, you'd have to tilt your head to be able to read it. So when the bookstore owner said that, I guess, I appreciate or whatever his outlook or whatever. I respect his opinion very much. So when he was very clear, real quickly, like, nope, don't do that. That's difficult. It makes it hard to read. It's hard on the eyes. So fine. I mean, it's kind of weird that you're always having to tilt your head if it's like that. But anyway, if he says, it's harder to read it going down vertically like that, I'm going to go with his opinion. So I'm not going to actually make that change for this book or any of my books. I just thought that'd be a brilliant idea, but apparently it's not a brilliant idea. It's difficult. Okay, now finally, let's get into reading the back of the book, and there's me. Okay, now right away, just looking at it from a distance, I can tell the font is just way too big and it's like way too close to the side. And I mean, the font is also real big as well, which, some people may like, but this is not meant to be like a large print version book. So I know I'll need to scrunch the font down a bit because it's just too big. And something else I did was actually in the cover here, right here is supposed to be a sun because I use this same image. So, I mean, it's the exact same image duplicated, just mirror image of it, I think. So right here, there would have been the sun behind all this font, so it'd be difficult to read. So for that little section there, I added a black background to make it easier to read. So, yeah. One thing I do want to do though is I actually like had it a little bit blended so the image would kind of appear through a little bit, but it really does not. It's really faint. So I could kind of make the background a little bit more, I guess it's transparent. So it's probably like, I'd probably send it to like 90% transparency. So I could probably lower it to about 70% transparency, just so the, the image of the tree kind of shines through a little bit more. And I know these are real small details, like why is he talking about all this stuff about the transparency of the, background there? Because these are just things you have to think about when you're writing the book and coming up with the book is, how you want the book to look. So, I can tell the font is too big. I could tell, the background there, I could make that more transparent. And yeah. But anyway, let's read the back of the book. And I just wrote this as I usually do in about 10 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes. I know like a lot of writers, a lot of authors always struggle when they come to writing the back of books. But I don't really, and a large part why, well, one part why is because I just don't really care about the back of books. So I just kind of write something, just write whatever. And, I don't care ultimately because I never read the back of books. But something I do, I don't know where I got this idea, but I just take the back of any random book, like whichever book happens to be lying nearby. Lying nearby. Where's that laying? I think it's lying. I don't know words, even though I'm a writer. I don't know. English sucks. I'm pretty sure it's lying though. Anyway, I forgot my train of thought. Back of books. I'm having a Biden. Oh, I remember. For back of books, when I come to write them, I just take any random book and I just kind of rewrite the back of that book to fit mine. So that just helps get words rolling. So for this one, it reads, and again, I just wrote this in 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll probably keep it with maybe only minor edits if I find any. But it says, Samuel Creed is about to become a husband, and if his fiance's frequent trips to the toilet to vomit are any indication, a father. In Nigeria, the terrorist group Boko Haram captures several hundred Christian girls from a school. Then it gets difficult to read because there's this band here saying not for resale. Under threats of assault and death, Eve, one of the kidnapped girls, must decide whether her faith is stronger than her captor's cruelty. Hampered by the new presidential administration, Creed and his small team of allies set out to rescue the girls in their most desperate struggle. Something I almost wrote for the back there was like rescue the girls in their most desperate hour or most desperate hours. But basically the book, like their captivity goes on for at least several months. So I thought it'd be wrong there to say like in their desperate hours because it's more than a few hours. So anyway, I like that. And as a description, I think it tells you everything about the book because I mean, Samuel Creed is about to become a husband. So that tells you they might get married in this book. They're not married yet, but they're about to be. His fiance's frequent trips to the toilet to vomit are any indication of father, which tells you he might become a dad soon. She might be pregnant. And then it goes on with the plot of the book. So Nigeria, the Boko Haram kidnappings, absolutely based on a real thing. The Chibok schoolgirl kidnappings, which is really quite difficult to write because I mean this is based on true events. The Chibok schoolgirls kidnapping by Boko Haram, absolutely real event. So that makes it real difficult to write, like writing about these girls who are victims to these assaults that actually happened. And the like villain of the book is based on the real like leader of Boko Haram at the time. So the Samuel Creed series has always been a very difficult series to write because there's so many things involved, like, you know, action plots like with counterterrorism and stuff, and like real events. So like the September 11th terrorist attacks and, you know, the Boko Haram kidnappings and so on and so forth. So there's those real very real things based on real events and stuff, and that's difficult to write. But also the book has some quite lighthearted and in some cases quite crazy and absurd scenes, and just like hopefully hilarious scenes. So it's real difficult. And also writing like romance as well as like family story and you know, more steamy-ish romance because like Sam and Tessa, you know, they're lovers, and in the past books you've seen like several love-making scenes with them. But it's real difficult to write that because to balance all of those emotions. So I don't want to go from like, you know, a love-making scene to like a, you know, funny scene with Rose, who is like a 10 or 11-year-old girl, or to go from, you know, a real violent scene about assault in Nigeria to a romance scene, you know, back in the United States, because that just like destroy the immersion. Because how would readers be able to go from a real dark emotional scene to like just a romance scene? They may not be in the mood for romance after the scene they just read. So it's a real difficult series to write because there's so many different elements to it, you know, action, counterterrorism, dark stuff, and also lighthearted stuff and romance and some steamier romance stuff. Real difficult to balance all of those things out and try to find ways to like transition to different scenes without it being jarring. and also trying to keep like the reader's emotional investment and have them care about each like different storyline and all that, and have time to be able to focus on each different storyline and devote time to it. One thing I decided to do for this book especially is there are few, if any, like steamier romance scenes, because I kind of just believed that I don't think readers would be in the mood for that because it's, of the more violent scenes. I don't know. And also, I'm not really comfortable writing that stuff anymore. So, book one, Keeping Creed, was pretty heavy with it. Book two, it has some of it, but I kind of tapered it down a little bit. But I've definitely kind of been wanting to get away from that because I just don't really like writing those scenes. So, at the time I thought, it's pretty popular. A lot of female readers, especially, like steamier scenes. But I just don't like it. I don't feel comfortable writing it. And honestly, I don't think I'm very good at it because, like, I think I've used up my vocabulary. Because, I mean, how often can I describe scenes about, like, waves of pleasure or whatever? I mean, to me, it just kind of sounds ridiculous. And, once I've done that in one scene, I can't do it in another scene, really, or another book. It'd just be repetitive. So I'm just not really good at writing those scenes. I don't feel comfortable writing those scenes, so I kind of wanted to get away from them in the series, and this is the perfect book to get away from them in, I guess, because it's just, you don't really want those scenes in this book, I think. So anyway, there's just not many steamy scenes, if any, in this book. I'm sorry I'm rambling so much. Oh, so actually, I would have 3 books in the editing stage. So, right now I'm also editing Autumn and Destiny, which is book, I don't know, 4 in the Trevor Knight series. That's a mammoth book. This is my largest book to date. So I'm editing this. Actually, I've edited it all already with a red pen. And so now I'm making the changes into the computer. That's a real time-consuming, arduous process. It's real exhausting. Also, I've edited this book, Arabian Dawn, book 5 in the Trevor Knight series. This has all been edited as well, and I've done that on other videos on this channel. So all the edits to this book are done, so I'm also needing to make those changes into the computer for this book. So this book, I think, once this is done, Autumn and Destiny, I would be on the 6th draft of Autumn and Destiny. So I would do 2 more drafts of this book. For Arabian Dawn, I think it was just the 4th draft edits I did, so I'll do the 5th, 6th, and 7th. I forgot how to count briefly. Gosh, I'm having so many Bidens. So anyway, gosh, now I'm forgetting where I was. So many Bidens. This is the 4th draft, so I need to do the 5th, 6th, and 7th draft of this book, Arabian Dawn. Those are in editing, and now I have the 4th draft of Keeping Fire. So I need to actually make the edits into this book. So, lots of editing, lots of writing. I've been busy, strangely. I don't feel like I've been too busy, or, well, actually, like the last 2 years I've been pretty productive writing. But anyway, so yeah, now I have 3 books that are going to be getting much closer to publication. Because once a book is in the editing stage, that kind of begins a countdown. Once a book starts getting edited, I can tend to publish it within about a year or so. So yeah, anyway. I am excited to begin editing the book. It's going to be weird because it's only, it's my first time editing it with a red pen. So I imagine it'll look pretty messy, especially like the first half of the book or so, maybe the first like 60% of the book, because I've actually, like, that part of the draft I wrote or whatever probably around a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And then just a few months ago, I've been working on the latter half of the book. So I think the latter half of the book might be more better written because it's more like my current writing standards. And so the first chunk of the book is probably going to be pretty messy because there's things that I've already kind of hopefully gotten rid of in my writing. But I haven't fixed yet in this book. So the first half of the book, I imagine, will be especially messy. And yeah, anyway, I've talked way too much. Let's actually begin. Now, I can't begin now because this book is not edited yet. It's completely blank, it's brand new. But over the coming weeks, I will begin editing this book and show you guys the changes I'm making. I do not know if I'm going to do the whole book in this video or not. I imagine it's already too long. I've been talking so long, but we'll see. Maybe I'll just do the whole book in this one video. I don't know. Because the Samuel Creed series is not like the Trevor Knight series where I have acts. It's all one thing. I mean, there's no act break. There's no act 1, act 2, act 3. It's all just one big book. I mean, I have chapters, but no act breaks. Anyway, I want to begin editing this, so that is it. Hopefully what will follow now will be the edits I'm actually making to the book. So hopefully you guys appreciate those. Hopefully you like that. Hopefully it gives you an inside look on my writing process. And if you're a writer, hopefully it helps you in your own writing. Maybe it gives you ideas for things to do for fixing your own writing or improving your own writing. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'm so sorry I've been rambling. Anyway, let's get into it. The edits of the 4th draft, the first time editing Keeping Fire, book 3 in the Samuel Creed series. Okay, cut to about a year later. I am about 6 or 7 days into a cold, so if you hear that I sound kind of funky, that is why. I apologize. Beginning on the left here, you see I added a map for the book. This is the only map in the book. I began adding maps to my books with Ottoman Destiny, and that's a country's spelling I always want to be very careful about, Niger. Near the bottom with Equatorial Guinea. For the border there, I think I may just kind of delete part of the eastern border, just so that word equatorial can kind of fit in better, so that the border doesn't like overlap it or whatever. I can just, take away that little part of the border. And then on the lower left, like the lettering for Africa, I think I want to slide those down a little bit. But I really like adding maps to my books. I don't know, it just looks good visually. And I also try to add any kind of location mentioned in the book onto the map. And these maps are something, of course, that I drew myself by hand on Microsoft Word. How is this for a first sentence of a book? Tessa Holt vomited that morning and couldn't have been happier. First sentence of the book. Oh, and one thing I do have to kind of apologize, because I'm not going to be super detailed about pointing out all of the edits of this book, because there's so many of them, but a lot of them I feel like I've covered in other editing explained videos. Anyway, to be a little detailed here for the start, the smell and sight, I think that just sounds weird in that word ordering, so the sight and smell, it seems a lot more natural that way. She sprayed a can of pine-scented Glade air freshener. I got rid of a can of because I think some people may want to take that literally, like she sprayed an entire can. No, but some people take things very literally, so I wanted to get rid of that. And then for Glade air freshener, I kind of decided why give them free advertisement, so why not just say generic, she sprayed pine-scented air freshener? Why specifically say Glade? I don't know, some people may kind of like name dropping a product because they may think like, oh, that's the same one I use. But again, it's kind of like, why advertise a specific type of air freshener instead of just a generic one? I don't know. And then beginning a sentence with usually, I don't really like beginning sentences with words ending in ly, so I kind of just wanted to get rid of it. But then the wording for but this morning, the book is written in past tense, so I don't really like saying that kind of wording, like on this morning, on this day, whatever, because that feels like, is the book set in the present day or not? I don't know, so I just said, but this time. And then it's a real small thing, but a small boat rocking terribly in a big ocean. I decided to get rid of that and just say the ocean, because it's like, aren't all oceans big? I mean, whether it's Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, whatever, they're all pretty big, so why say a big ocean? Just say the ocean. These next few pages kind of show you what I thought the entire book would be like just, 10 or 20 changes per page. And this was pretty bad because this is like the first edit of the book, but this is kind of to be expected. This is about what I expected the changes to the book would look like, 10 or 20 corrections per page. But then reality sinks in, and this is more what the edits to the book look like on the right side of the page. Just a lot of red ink and a lot of small print. The dialogue there, but you're sick. I thought that was just real obvious dialogue, so cut it. And then that next line, yesterday, I decided to move that down to the next paragraph. Since it's a line from Tessa, the previous line of dialogue, when did you start puking? That's a line from Sam, so she rubbed her wet nose and sniffled yesterday, so that's obviously Tessa replying. Then the next line would obviously be Sam speaking. But if I have it this way, when did you start puking? That's Sam. Yesterday, that's Tessa. She rubbed her wet nose and sniffled. And then that line, you're probably pregnant, blah, blah, blah. Who is that line from? It's a little bit less clear, even though context should tell you who it is. You're probably pregnant. So, I mean, obviously that would be Sam speaking since there's the only two of them in this scene. And the next line down, I saw her a few weeks ago, she said. So obviously you know that previous line, you're probably pregnant, is from Sam. But I thought just by moving that word yesterday to the previous or the next line, she rubbed her wet nose. I don't know, it just makes it a little bit easier to follow who is saying each line. I don't know, real small thing, but I thought it just read a little bit better. Oh, no, actually, this isn't Sam and Tessa. This is Megan and Tessa. So, yeah, never mind. Okay, this is Eve's first scene. Eve is the Nigerian girl who is kidnapped by Boko Haram. I'm not going to show too much of her scenes because what I wound up doing is I wound up just skipping Eve's scenes because there were so many changes and I really did not feel comfortable editing her scenes just because they're real violent. And I don't know, just for whatever reason, I did not like editing those scenes with a red pen. They're real difficult scenes to work with because she's, dealing with a lot of abuse and stuff. And I was just really uncomfortable. So whenever I would come upon one of her scenes, I'd always wait like days and days and days or weeks until I would finally edit her scenes. So after 5 scenes or so of her, I just wound up kind of skipping her scenes, just leaving them unedited because I decided I will edit her scenes on the computer. And part of why I edit her scenes so extensively here is because it's real difficult to present her scenes just because there's so much emotional stuff going on with her, so much trauma. So I have to be very careful about how I choose to present that. So there's a lot of changes I make. But anyway, this just shows you a look at, some of the extensive edits to her scenes. This sentence here felt passive. The uniform each girl wore consisted of. So change it to each girl wore an asparagus colored blouse, hunter green skirt, belt, whatever. Oh my goodness, here's another example of an Eve chapter or scene getting rewritten quite extensively. Part of why I kind of changed her scene here is because Eve felt really combative, like she's trying to protect her teacher, so she kind of goes to attack these guys who are attacking her teacher. But I didn't want to give the impression that Eve is like a fighter, so she's not real combative, aggressive, whatever. She is more of I don't know how else to say it, a lover. She wants to protect her teacher. So she's not doing this to attack the other guys. She is doing it to protect her teacher. So I kind of rewrote it a little bit to kind of emphasize that. Eve is a person who would not otherwise get in any kind of fight, but she is doing this because she's trying to protect her teacher. She's a good-hearted person. If I had it the other way, the way I had it originally, it was more like, this character Eve is just kind of a loose cannon. She's going to go off. She's a chihuahua barking at cars or whatever, So I just wanted to kind of change how I present her character a little bit to emphasize that she is doing this because she is trying to be protective and caring toward her teacher. And just more edits for Eve's scene. Oh, it's a mess. So this is going to take a little while to make all the corrections into the computer. I really should have double spaced this book so I could have more room to add changes. Again, I thought this sentence was passive. Creed was told 3 times. I say it in a lot of videos, but the use of the word was tends to indicate passive sentences. So instead of Creed was told, I say told 3 times to say Creed couldn't blah, blah, blah. And then that wording, where across a mahogany desk sat the president's name, that also felt passive. Again, you see repetition of the word was, which could be passive. The result was that the bulk of his workday was. So 2 was's in that sentence. So instead of hunting terrorist the bulk of his work consisted of. So that removes both wases. Oh, this is kind of cool. So there's this section here where Tessa and Sam are having a text message chat, and for whatever reason, the two like blocky square things kind of towards the bottom, those were meant to be smile emojis, but for whatever reason, they did not copy onto this document. So you could see I have this note, maybe draw an image of this conversation. So I did that. Since I began adding maps to my book, I kind of thought, well, what if I add other images to the book as well? So one of the things I thought of was actually making this text conversation look like their actual cell phones, like you're actually looking at their cell phone. And I know that they use iPhones, and I believe they are using the iPhone 1 because in the previous book, they get like the first iPhone. So whether they've upgraded or not, I don't know, but so what I wanted to do was I wanted to look up the actual image of like an iPhone 1 to see what an iPhone 1 looked like and draw that into the image. So I did, and here it is. I just think it's real funny, like adding an actual image of their cell phone. So I'm not like sure that this is how the iPhone 1 looked, but it's just what I saw for like Google search results. So I don't know. I just think it looks real cool. Like, you know, I've never had an iPhone before, but maybe people who have an iPhone would like see this and remember like, oh my gosh, that's so like sentimental or whatever. You know, it's so nostalgic. Like, oh, I remember like how my screen looked like that. So I don't know. I just thought it was real cool to add that in. I like it a lot. Oh my goodness. And here you see just the changes I'm making to the book. And this is why editing is so difficult. I love the actual editing part, editing with a red pen. That is fun to me. And I like that I have my books all marked up in red ink because each change means the book is getting that much better. And I already like this book keeping fire pretty well. So if you look at each change, the book is getting that much better with each change. But it is really tiresome to make all these changes into the computer. Oh, this would be kind of easy to change though. You can see I pretty much get rid of an entire paragraph there. That's kind of nice. Just like, oh, goodbye. And I won't really go into why I deleted this paragraph, but you know, basically it's just I decided it's not necessary to tell the story. Maybe I already sprinkle in some of these details elsewhere in the book, so I do not need it here. Maybe it's slowing the pacing, whatever reason. I just felt, you know, this is unnecessary. Oh my gosh, and then there's sections like this where not only do I like cross out almost an entire paragraph, I also have like a different alternate paragraph written squeezed in between each line. And so again, this is why editing is difficult, because I just had to find exactly where I'm supposed to leave off. So I'm not even getting rid of the entire paragraph here. So it's just at the top of the line, the back of her neck. So that's the last thing that stays. So basically I just delete everything after that point. So then it's, you know, just having the line turning to him, her hands, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends with I made ginger ale. So anyway, it's just, oh, it's a lot of work. It's going to take a while. But I don't struggle too bad with finding the corrections into the computer. There's only a very few times where maybe I cannot read a word I wrote and just do not know what I was trying to do. So occasionally times like that, you know, I may kind of have to sit and think for a while, like, what was I supposed to do here? And maybe I'll come up with a different fix instead, like if I can't read the word I wrote. Or maybe I'll just find a better way to redo it, whatever, on the spot on the computer. It's not really hard to do, it's just exhausting. I mean, look at this. The wording goes all the way down the page on the left, there's wording up on the right, then it goes all the way down the page, the right side of the left page, and then on the right page there's that whole block of text up there, and I kind of drew a line there where the line would go, so on the right side of the page there, the line is going to as she did so. So that tells me that little paragraph there, well, not a little paragraph, but that goes after that line as she did so. Oh, it's just exhausting. And you can see how small I write. Oh, so this is actually from the previous image, but what I wanted to point out here, I have this line where, you know, these girls are kidnapped in Nigeria by this terrorist group, and they want the girls to convert to Islam. And so one or two girls like does volunteer to convert to Islam. And so originally I kind of had the line where Eve appeared like angry that these girls would do that. But I decided to add this line where basically she says that even though she doesn't like agree with them doing that, she understands why. I mean, they are terrified and they're afraid for their lives. So she's not as upset as she was kind of originally, because I felt readers may think that's really dismissive of her. Like, come on, these girls are terrified. How can you really blame them? So it just kind of, I don't know, humanizes or empathizes Eve's character a little bit more, where, she doesn't want to convert at all. She's unwilling to do that. She's not even going to consider it, but she kind of understands that these girls are terrified, so she understands why they're doing that. I don't know, I think it's just better for her character. Makes her more relatable, makes her more likable. Because if Eve is not able to show empathy with the other girls who are like choosing to convert to Islam, why would readers have empathy for Eve? Eve has to be caring for other people in order for readers to care about her, I believe. And again, just showing you changes to the book, like 20 corrections per page. It just takes so long. Even though it's just like one word here or there, it takes a while. It's exhausting. It's tiresome. I decided to add this line up here at the top. I kind of meant to do this more in the original draft, but I wasn't as clear about it as I wanted to be. So I have this line here: did he know about his racquetball match in New York? That is a reference to German Derelict, where I don't want to go into it, but there is a racquetball match in the book that has a pretty important meaning for the plot. And in the book, I don't say who this character is, but if you read my other books, it would be clear that it's Samuel Creed, because he's like 6'6" and he has hazelnut eyes, I think. And he also says his name is Joe Underhill, and I got the name Underhill from Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo says his name is Underhill. So in another book, Syrian Dander, Samuel Creed says to someone that his name is Joe Underhill. And so that's the name of the guy in German Derelict who was in the racquetball match. So you know that that character was Samuel Creed. But anyways, I just wanted to add this line here where basically Samuel Creed did something highly illegal. He gave like classified information to a journalist in New York because there's this nuclear reactor in Iran and the government wasn't doing anything about it, the US government. So Samuel Creed passed that classified information off to this journalist, which I know is like highly illegal. And in hindsight, I don't think Samuel Creed would have done that at all, but I had him do it in German Derelict. It was the original idea that Samuel Creed would do that. That's kind of why I created his character. So yeah, I don't like that plot now. I don't like the book German Derelict. I'm quite ashamed of it. I'm always apologizing for it. But I'm not going to like pretend it's not canon or whatever. I'm not going to just like omit German Derelict from my bibliography or whatever, So, I mean, it is what it is. I did things with that book I would not have done now. But anyway, so I just got to roll with it. So I added the line where Samuel Creed specifically mentions where it's really clear that, it was him who did that thing with the racquetball thing in German Derelict. And the purpose of it is Samuel Creed is meeting with like the president's national security staff, and this guy he's talking to, Mace Davenport, he used to run the Central Intelligence Agency. So this guy like presumably knows a lot about stuff, like a lot of dirty secrets and stuff. So Samuel Creed is kind of worried, like, oh shit, does this guy know that I broke the law? Does he know that I gave this classified information? Because, I mean, he could be thrown in prison for this. So he's really worried, like, oh shit, does this guy know what I did? What I wanted to point out here, there's this line where Tessa is talking about how Rose looks so much like her Uncle Sam, just like their character, their personalities and stuff, just how similar they are. And there's this line that, Rose is a junior version of Creed himself. I was kind of worried some people may wonder, like, oh, is she so much like him because he is actually not her uncle? Is he actually potentially Rose's real father? Which is, definitely not the case. I mean, there should not be any kind of suspicion whatsoever in readers' mind that Rose is actually Samuel Creed's daughter. So I did not really want that line it's a close to a junior version of Creed himself. So I just changed it to a Creed she definitely was, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there is like no question, Rose is not Samuel Creed's daughter. I did not want to give readers that idea at all. Just some more changes. Oh my gosh, this is so tiresome doing all these changes. But at the same time, you look at all the changes, and to me, I just think, I like the book as it is. So to have it get this much better on every single page, 20 changes or whatever per page, getting that much better, I really like it. And this is only the 4th draft. I'm going to do 3 more drafts after this. So it's just a process of making the book better. So kind of like, this draft has 10 to 20 corrections per page. The next draft will hopefully have like 8 corrections per page. The next draft may have like 4 or 5. And then like, the final draft or 2 may just have like 2 corrections per page. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is more like 30 corrections per page. And again, you could see I drew lines to show where I want each like blocky paragraph to go. Oh my goodness, look at all these corrections. Oh, I think I'll actually kind of mention this a little bit later, but this is the first of like 2 flights over Nigeria where the British are trying to locate the kidnapped girls. And so for this first flight here over the country, this plane is coming in to land or whatever, it's like a female crew, or the main character you meet is a female, and it's just kind of a little bit of a theme in my books that I try to have like strong female characters sprinkled throughout the book. But I definitely do not like how a lot of female characters are presented nowadays, where it's just like girl boss characters, where it's, women who are good at everything and their goal is to like overthrow the patriarchy or whatever, and just like girl power stuff. I do not like that at all. I think that's incredibly lame. But what I try to have is like strong female characters without like having as much attention on it. So I mean, it's just like very matter of factly, this crew of this plane is, female, or the main character is female. I don't know how many of the characters are female. I think both the pilot and this co-pilot here though are female. And so anyway, I don't know, I just like it. I like having that kind of female representation or whatever, where, this is like a military flight, but it's a female crew or whatever. Historically, like, this character would have been a male, but, it's sort of keeping up with the times. Oh, and also her name is Unanisa. I think she is actually largely Indian. And so, yeah, again, it's just sort of diversity. So it's not just like a generic British female whatever, it's actually like this is obviously like an Indian immigrant to the United Kingdom and whatever. So it just shows more real world, I think. I don't think there's anything I want to point out here. Just shows the edits I'm making to the book. More edits, nothing I think I want to point out. I really like the scene. They go to a baseball game and Tessa like comes back to the seats and says like she threw up on a little girl. And then it's really funny, I think, where Samuel Creed and Rose kind of tease her a little bit. They kind of have fun with it. They think this is pretty funny that she threw up on someone. But Vanessa, another character, is really chiding them like, hey, stop it. Tessa feels bad. I'm so sorry, Tessa. That's horrible. I'm sorry. But Sam and Rose are like, this is hilarious. So they're just like saying stuff. And I like it because it shows so much their character. Like, it shows why I said before, these characters are so similar. So it shows how they're both Creeds. Creeds are kind of notoriously like, I don't know. They're a little bit rambunctious. They're a little bit sinister. They kind of like getting into mischief. They're very mischievous people, Creeds. So they love this. They think this is hilarious. And I don't know, I just like it. I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the book. But anyway, what I wanted to point out here is I mentioned in previous videos that I don't like using character names. I try to use he or she, but as a result, I tend to begin a lot of sentences with she, so I try to get rid of them whenever possible. So a way to do that, instead of she squeezed past them, is to begin the sentence with squeezing. Squeezing past them, she plopped into her seat and covered, whatever. Oh, this is kind of a neat little scene or moment I added where Rose is in Samuel Creed's office and she sees on his whiteboard he has a saying Boko Haram terrorist organization, and it shows, like their list of crimes kind of. And so she looks at that, and what he is about to do is add to it, because he adds this line on the bottom, the Gambaroo whatever Nagala massacre, 300 people killed, 12 more girls captured, is what that line is saying. I decided before he added that final line, he kind of looks over and he says, like, Rose? And she says, yes, pizza dropper, because he dropped a pizza in a previous scene. So that's like what she's always calling him now. I just love the rapport these two have. Rose is my favorite character in all of my books. But anyway, so he just says, like, there are evil people in the world. And so they just kind of have a little tiny conversation where, I kind of realized it would be awkward him doing this work, like, kind of in front of her. She is just like reading a book or whatever in his office. But yeah, so it's just kind of a neat little moment, I think, where he kind of looks over and, these characters are real playful to each other. Sam is a real good uncle to his niece, he loves her and whatever. He likes to play around with her, kid around with her. But this is serious, so he just kind of looks over and he has kind of a serious moment with her where before he writes this thing on the board about this massacre, he just kind of looks over her and kind of says, like, hey, there's bad things in the world. I don't want to go into it too much. You could stop and read it if you want, if you could read my writing. And it's not too, like, emotional of a scene between them, but I don't know, I just liked it to add that little bit of, I don't know, world building or whatever, just where they kind of have a moment of seriousness. And Rose, of course, knows how the world is because her father, Sawyer, was killed in the September 11th attacks. He was in the Pentagon. So it's just sort of a little moment where Samuel Creed is like, I've already mentioned it, but, hey, the bad things happen in the world. You know this, so whatever. I think originally I wanted him to say, like, don't look at this board, like, don't look at what I'm about to add. But part of Samuel Creed's character is he does not believe that is a way to deal with kids, because if you tell a kid not to look at something, they're going to want to look even more. And the reason I kind of mentioned that is because Samuel Creed is a gun owner. And so it's kind of an issue between him and Tessa, where Tessa doesn't really want guns in the house and she doesn't want guns around her kids. And Samuel Creed is the opposite. Samuel Creed was raised around guns. So he knows, like, how to deal with children with firearms. So, like, Tessa, if there were, like, have to be guns in the house, Tessa's view would be to tell the children, like, don't look at the guns, don't touch the guns, don't be interested in the guns, stay away from the guns. But Samuel Creed knows that does not work with children. If you tell children that, they're going to want to get into those guns as soon as possible. They're going to want to check out those guns, play with those guns, whatever. So I just really did not like that idea for Sam's character where he would tell Rose, don't look at what I'm about to write, because he would know she would want to look. So that's why I instead had this line where he talks about, like, hey, there's evil people in the world, right? Before he writes this. I don't know. I'm sorry I talked so much about it, but it was just a neat, real little scene I chose to add. And then this part, I changed it, the head of site. That's where Samuel Creed works for, the section for investigating terrorist events. It's a fictitious part of Homeland Security, not a real agency. I thought when I wrote the book Keeping Creed that Samuel Creed's main boss kind of was this guy named John Dorgan. But then I think in this book, do I introduce Aubrey Lannister, who is like the guy above John Dorgan. So I think in this book you realize that John Dorgan is not actually Samuel Creed's main boss. There's actually a boss ahead of him who is this guy Aubrey Lannister. But then in the next book, Keeping Tessa, which I'm working on as the first draft, I decided that there's actually another boss ahead of Aubrey Lannister. So Aubrey Lannister is not even the main boss at site. He's really just like the number 2 guy. So John Dorgan is the undersecretary for sight. And then I had to come up with what's a job beneath the secretary, because you actually meet the secretary of sight in the next book. So what's below that? So I looked up like actual government agencies, US government agencies, to figure out like the chain of command. So like some of them, they have a secretary, and then the next one down would be an undersecretary. But other agencies have what's called a deputy secretary. So I decided that is the chain of command. So there's the secretary, the big boss. Then there's the deputy secretary. That's the number 2 boss. That's Aubrey Lannister. And then there's the undersecretary, which is John Dorgan. So John Dorgan is actually like the 3rd in command. And then in the next book, Keeping Tessa, you meet the actual number 1 boss. But then it's also kind of, there's a boss above him because they are a part of the Department of Homeland Security. So really, in a way, the main big boss, the Secretary of Sight, is kind of one of the secretaries for the main secretary who leads the Department of Homeland Security. So the Department of Homeland Security chief is the really big boss. So it's just kind of a bureaucratic thing, you know? It seems like every single character has a boss above them. It's just, that's the bureaucracy. By all rights, John Dorgan should be the main boss of Sight. I mean, he's the one Samuel Creed answers to, but he has a boss, and his boss has a boss, and his boss's boss has a boss. And that's government for you. Oh my freaking gosh, look at all these changes. I mean, the whole page just red ink all the way down. This is going to take a while. Oh, and then there's the wording was feeling. Again, I just think was is passive, and also this just seems poorly written. Asked how she was feeling. Asked how she felt. It's a lot more concise. Oh, and then there's another was. She was dressed. So I just begin the sentence, whatever it is, with dressed, blah, blah, blah. I kind of try to avoid the word was a little bit. I don't like completely try to get rid of it, because I mean, was is just a real common word. But I think it can be indicative of poor writing. So a lot of times if I see the word was, I try to think like, is there a better way I could write this sentence? Oh, and this is a real small change, but Megan here says science has shown that jealousy makes men better lovers. I decided to add the line that Vanessa says that science has shown, because Vanessa, this other character, is really big on science. So I kind of realized, like, instead of just generically saying science has shown, I was like, well, Vanessa's the one who loves science, so why not just have this line where Vanessa told this to her? So just to have a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it world building, but yeah, so Vanessa is the character who really likes science. So that is where Megan heard this from, that, oh, Vanessa told me that whatever. And the reason Vanessa would know that is because Vanessa reads about this kind of stuff. I have this line here. I didn't really need it, but, you know, whatever. I like having red ink in the book. So what happens here occasionally, this is something dealing with the alignment of the book. So you see the word in there on the left, and then December goes all the way to the right, because this is on like justified font. And I don't know exactly why this happens, but it's got to be something with just like the spacing or whatever after probably the word December. So for whatever reason, Microsoft Word tries to justify the font, so it like splits it up like this. So I think all I need to do is after that word December in the quotes to just hit enter. And then of course I had to delete the paragraph I just made, because if I hit enter, there'll be a gap, you know, a paragraph gap between December and Tessa. There'll be a space there. There'll be a line. So I just need to hit enter and then backspace to delete that line. And then that word December will go to the left side of the page. So it's just something dealing with the alignment. I don't know exactly why it happens, but yeah, that's basically the way to fix it. Just hit enter once and then hit backspace. So yeah. Oh my goodness, and this is not a small thing. Look at all that, like just little tiny writing and just squeezed in there. And again, you can see I'm not getting rid of that whole paragraph. It looks like I'm just getting rid of one sentence. So I have to like fit all of that red ink, whatever, into the previous line. And then, oh, I think I kind of gave myself a clue. So there at the end of that little paragraph there, you could see I wrote, it was then ... So that tells me exactly there's that line, it was then that Olivia revealed she and her husband, whatever. So that just lets me know once I get to that end of that line, it was then. Then I'll know, like, oh, okay, that's when I resume with what I originally had. It was then that Olivia revealed whatever. So just kind of a clue I leave myself to make it easier when I put this changes into the computer. I decided to add this line on the right because I explain how Samuel Creed is not much into video games, which does not seem like it would be consistent with his character because he's like a guy, he's a young guy, and he had a lot of brothers. So I was like, why wouldn't Samuel Creed play a lot of video games? And kind of the reason I established that is because in another book, Trevor Knight, who is kind of a gamer, mentions like to Samuel Creed, he's like, hey, have you ever played Command and Conquer? And Samuel Creed is like, no. And so I kind of had the idea that Samuel Creed is not much of a gamer like Trevor Knight is. And so I kind of wanted to explain why didn't Samuel Creed play video games? Because I mean, to me, like video games were my life, and Samuel Creed is about my same age. So it's like, why wouldn't he have played video games? So I decided to add this line where basically it says since he grew up with 5 brothers, they were always doing something. You know, they were always like someone was always tossing a football or going out, riding their bikes, whatever. He had a very active household. There was always things going on. So he didn't really need to play video games because he could just play with all of his brothers and all of his like brothers' friends and stuff. So he never had a shortage for things to do, activities to do. So as a result, Samuel Creed just didn't really play video games much when he was a kid because he was playing other games with his brothers and his friends. So that is why Samuel Creed is not too much of a gamer. But it says, you know, he definitely did play some games. So he knows like Mega Man, Sonic, Link, Samus Aran, who is from Metroid. So it does let you know he did play video games, just not too much. For these next couple images, I decided to rewrite I don't know if I want to say rewrite because I mean it's real small tweaks to the scene or whatever. But basically there's this group of people. There's like Spencer West, Marcy Haywood, Vincent Peppers, Samuel Creed. They all work in counterterrorism. They're talking about this group, Boko Haram, and like the leader of Boko Haram and stuff. And I don't know exactly how to say it here, but I really wanted to tweak it a little bit where each person gives some kind of useful information. So basically the function of this scene is to explain the plot to readers, explain about Boko Haram and who leads them and stuff. So you have all these characters get together, but I can't just have them all know everything because then why would they be talking about this? Like if they all know this, why would they be sharing this information, you know? I talk about in other videos where I don't like in books or movies where there's a line like, as you know, Boko Haram is led by whatever. Why would you say that? If people already know that, why would you say that? It's just a way to tell readers, like, as you know, so and so, whatever. I just find that stupid. So I really want to avoid any kind of like, as you know, line, but I also want to show all these characters do know their stuff. So how do I manage that? How do I explain things to readers without like saying things that all these characters know? So basically, yeah, I have these 4 characters in the room. And so I kind of sprinkle in like this person knows this little piece of information. This person knows this piece of information. So they're kind of like, you know, hashing it out, making sure they're all on the same page. So Samuel Creed is kind of like the least familiar with this area. So he doesn't know as much as these other characters do. And also Samuel Creed is the newest one working for this agency. So it kind of makes sense that these other people know a little bit more than he does on this. But at the same time, Samuel Creed has been working on this subject for a week or so he should know some things. So he's not just a complete idiot. I also have it where Samuel Creed does also share information. He's not just being a sponge like asking, what's this? Who's that? Who's that? Whatever. Because I think that's kind of annoying, that character. And Samuel Creed is supposed to be a smart person. He's supposed to be working for this company for a reason because he has some expertise in counterterrorism stuff. So occasionally in the scene, you'll see that Samuel Creed does actually give information as well as receive. But yeah, mainly the reason for the scene is just explaining stuff to readers. But yeah, I'm kind of tweaking it a little bit to make sure that each person contributes some kind of knowledge, where it's not just one person is a clueless idiot, because I think that's annoying. So each person shares something valuable here. Each person who works for this company has a use, has a skill, has a knowledge. And I think that's just a lot better. Instead of having one character who is a complete moron, who everyone has to explain things to because the writer is trying to explain things to readers. Oh my goodness, look at all this. Just really small font, and it actually bleeds over into the next page. So that line on the right side of the page, I think that actually goes somewhere on the left side of the page, but I just ran out of room. And then you see in the upper line, and occasionally birds and squirrels. Creed said, "You don't treat squirrels and birds." I chose to redo the ordering of that because Rose says birds and squirrels. So why does Sam say squirrels and birds? So since she said birds and squirrels, Samuel Creed should say birds and squirrels in that same order. I don't know, it's just a real small thing that bothered me. Oh my goodness, get rid of a paragraph and add a paragraph. Oh, this is actually another Eve scene. So like I said, I wound up just kind of not editing Eve's scenes in this book after doing like 4 or 5, just because it was distracting me so much. I was like so reluctant to work on her scenes. I was just not really doing them. So I decided to just edit her scenes on the computer. Just that would be easier for me. But anyway, eventually I kind of got a little bit more comfortable dealing with some of Eve's chapters. So this is actually Eve's final scene in this part of the book. The problem here, I won't go into it in depth at all, but what I had was the timing was kind of confusing, because what I kind of wrote originally was like kind of recapping that day and maybe even the previous day. So things were just kind of weirdly out of order or whatever, where like the scene begins where she's in bed, then it talks about how like the previous day or earlier in the day she explored the house. Then I had the line like she gets out of bed, and then I was like, wait, what? Didn't she just explore the house? And I was kind of confused by it. So I chose to rewrite it where everything happens in one moment or whatever. So I don't have it where it's like Eve is in bed and then she checks out the house earlier in the day and then she gets out of bed. It was just kind of weird chronologically, whatever. So I just had it all happen sequentially or whatever. So she wakes up or whatever in bed, she gets out of bed, she kind of looks around the house, and then she hears a noise outside and she looks out the window. So it's a lot more streamlined, I guess. Instead of saying like earlier in the day or the previous day, just kind of thrown into the middle. I thought it was kind of jarring. So this, I think, just makes it read and flow a lot better. Oh, and then I was mentioning like the girl power stuff. So this is another scene where I have this military flight of this like recon aircraft going over Nigeria looking for the girls, and both of the crew are women. So I just really like that. So, you know, it's kind of my way of having girl power, where, you know, this military flight is both women. Oh, but also what I wanted to show here was I go into some of the colonial history of Africa, because kind of throughout the book I mentioned like the United Kingdom is kind of involved in Nigeria and France is involved in Chad, but I didn't explain why that is. So right here I kind of added this part where I talk about some of the colonial history of Africa, how pretty much all of the African continent was at one time divided up by the United Kingdom, France, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, and maybe one other that I can't think of offhand. The Americans also at one point had kind of a colony in Liberia, which was independent in the 1800s. Also, Ethiopia was also independent. They were fighting the Italians. So those were kind of like the two main countries at the time, like, you know, the late 1800s, early 1900s, that were independent, I think. Liberia and Ethiopia. But otherwise, like, all of Africa at one point had European powers controlling them. And so I kind of just wanted to add this section where I talk about that. So that kind of explains why, even to this day, the British are kind of more involved with Nigeria, because Nigeria was at one time one of the British holdings or whatever. And Chad, the neighboring country, is more involved. France is more involved there today, and the reason is because Chad used to be more of a French colony or whatever. So it's just kind of touching on the colonial history of Africa. I liked adding that. Anyway, back to the female crew. I just want to read this real quick, just because I like it. Aside from her service in Libya, Klinke piloted GR-4 aircraft in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because she was born of a German father and a half-English, half-Japanese mother, her squadron mates inevitably gave her the call sign of Axis. This is something in my books where in movies, call signs for like fighter pilots is always like a real cool nickname, you know, like Maverick or Iceman or whatever. I mean, it's always like a cool, enviable nickname. But what I have in my books is that pilots are like relentless toward each other, so they will tend to give each other call signs that are not very flattering, where they're kind of like teasing them for some kind of thing they've done wrong or whatever. So it's not so much like in movies where it's like a real cool call sign. It's more, you know, it's more the pilots kidding each other. So since this one woman is part German and Japanese, her call sign is Axis. That is not something she chose for herself. That's something where they chose it for her. So, you know, whenever, you know, she would have met the other people she's working with and like, you know, talking with them and like, hey, yeah, so who are your parents? You know, where are you from? Whatever. And she says like, oh yeah, my father's German, my mother's Japanese. So you could just imagine the other pilots would have been like, you know, well, you're just a goddamn Axis member or whatever. So that's how she got her name. So other pilots in my books get their names the same way. Like two different pilots have like crashed at previous points. So one of them was called Divot because they crashed in a golf course. So that's like something you do, you know, when you hit a golf club into the ground and whatever, it's a divot. And another character in this book, in fact, crashes, or not crashes, but they like go off the runway and land in the dirt. So their nickname, their call sign is Molehill. One person in another book like threw up during a flight, so their name is Puke. Another flyer at some point like, you know, pooped themselves during a flight, so their name is Stain. So it's just something in my books where the call signs are not like cool, enviable nicknames. The call signs are, you know, pilots teasing each other relentlessly about something they've done at some point in their life or career. And I think that's kind of realistic with a lot of call signs. That's how it is. So basically, the whole point of this, in this scene, this one character here, it talks about how she is kind of new to this crew, so she hasn't acquired a call sign yet. She is actually going to wind up fainting during this flight because she's like so afraid of what's going on because something happens on the flight where it's kind of a disaster and they have to make an emergency landing. And so she passes out during the flight. And so at the end of the scene, this character Axis says, like, congratulations, Lieutenant, you now have that call sign you've been so eager to get. From now on, your name is Coma. So that's how this character gets her call sign. She becomes Coma. That is her name because she is going to faint on this flight because she's so terrified that they're going to crash and die. So I just really like it. I think right here I'm just showing you guys a lot of the red ink, just like, oh boy, look at all this. Oh, I really like this. This is not actually like an edit I want to point out. This is just like something for the book I really like, where these characters, it's the Secretary of Defense, Mace Davenport, the guy who used to be head of the CIA. He is in a meeting with the Secretary of State, and basically they're talking about like, hey, we have a job in Nigeria, you know, do you have anyone you want to send? And so Mace Davenport says, I believe I do. And then it's kind of a jump cut to Samuel Creed. So I talk about in other videos how I picture my books like I am sitting in a movie theater watching the movie of my book, and I just kind of write what I see happening next in the film. That's just how I write. So anyway, I just think that would be a real good immediate jump cut, you know? So the guy is like, well, who do we send to Nigeria? And then cut to Samuel Creed. So like thematically, as soon as it cuts to Samuel Creed, that would tell you, oh, so they are going to send Samuel Creed. So doing it here in the book just kind of tells you the same thing. So you know, oh, this is where Samuel Creed is going to get sent to Nigeria. And again, I just kind of really like this scene. So Spencer, Creed said, entering the office, yo, you busy? Extremely. Doing? Playing Minesweeper. So that's just what these guys are doing, you know. They're working for the government, they work in counterterrorism. And so usually like in books and stuff, I they would try to like, you know, make it so their job is really exciting and adventurous and like, you know, for other authors, they may begin the scene with like Samuel Creed taking down some kind of terrorist somewhere or something, you know, but instead he just walks into the office and this guy's just playing Minesweeper. That's what these guys do. They don't really battle terrorism all day. They're just on their computers, sending emails, playing Minesweeper. That's what they really do for their like daily work life, whatever. I don't know. I just think it's kind of funny. Oh, and again, I'm not really showing out any kind of edits here, but what's going on here? Oh, actually, there is something I want to point out. At the very top there, you could see I have cross out two periods theory, and I have it multiple periods instead. Period is the name of the leader of Boko Haram. Jamu Period is his name. Part of the plot of the book is that there is questions about if there are multiple Ajamu periods because there's like a video he released that's very bizarre. So they're kind of wondering like, you know, does this guy have a body double? But anyway, throughout the book or whatever, and it's kind of a smaller storyline, at times I call it the two periods theory. Other times I call it the multiple periods theory. I decided to just make it one thing, so I changed all of it to multiple periods theory. So that's just a real small edit. But anyway, so Samuel Creed is, you know, they kind of explain to him why there's this theory that there may be multiple versions of this guy. He may have body doubles or whatever. So Samuel Creed has this whole paragraph where he tries to explain, like, no, there doesn't need to be any kind of body doubles because I can explain it naturally. And so he has this whole paragraph. He explains against their reasons why they believe there could be multiple periods. And so I just sum it up at the end by the very line at the very bottom. Wes said, anything requiring that long of an explanation is BS. So I just thought that's kind of funny where Samuel Creed has this whole paragraph explaining like, oh no, there could be this other explanation. And so this other character says anything that requires that much words is BS. So I don't know, I just thought it was funny. Oh, and this is just kind of a minor thing. But Samuel Creed, you know, he is going to Nigeria and then he decides to go back home because his fiance or whatever is really sick. Or actually, I don't know if they're married at this point. No, they're not. They're still engaged. So Samuel Creed returns to the United States from Nigeria, and it sets off a big fight. Tessa and he have several arguments over the phone because she just doesn't want him to come back because she's like, I'm fine, I'll deal with it myself. Don't worry about it. But he's like, no, I need to come home. I need to take care of you. So they're fighting over it. So he's heading home, but they're like in the midst of huge fight, him and Tessa. So I originally had it where he is contemplating like, hey, maybe I could stay over at, you know, my brother-in-law's house or something, you know, or maybe even stay at a hotel just because he's really kind of reluctant to go home because he and Tessa are fighting so much. But then I realized that entire idea like contradicts his entire reason for going home. He wants to go home because Tessa's really sick and he wants to be there for her and take care of her. So it does not make sense from a character standpoint that he would even want to consider like, hey dude, can I stay over at your place tonight? Can I crash at your house tonight? Because, you know, Tess and I are going through things. The whole point of him going home to the United States was because he wants to be there for Tessa. So how would it make sense that he would want to crash at someone else's house because he and Tessa are fighting? He wants to be there for Tessa, even though they are fighting and she is mad at him. You know, he wants to be there for her. So it did not make sense that he would even consider, you know, hey, can I crash at your place? He wants to go home. He wants to be there for Tessa. So I had to make that change just to better fit his character motivation. I think it's sort of something writers need to be on guard about is making sure character motivation is consistent. So like, yeah, ordinarily when the characters are fighting this much, you know, a character may be tempted to be like, you know, dude, can I crash at your place? But you have to consider character motivation. His motivation is he wants to be there for Tessa. So it would not make sense him wanting to sleep at someone else's house.
And this part, I don't know exactly like how realistic this is or like what better way I could have done this. But what happens here is there's this character, Hassan, who is like a former CIA operative. He pretty much murders this guy. And then eventually what I had him do is he like washes off like the blood, off his arms into the sink in this guy's apartment because, he's pretty much covered in blood because he just killed this guy. So, whatever. He like towels dry and then he talks about how he throws away the bloody rag like a block away from the apartment. But I just kind of thought, well, isn't there several traces he could be leaving? So if he washes his hands and arms in the sink, isn't it possible he could leave like a hair in the sink that could leave his DNA there? And if he just like throws a bloody rag in a trash can like a block away, if the police discover this murdered guy in this apartment, wouldn't it make sense that they would kind of want to check some nearby garbage bins to see if someone left a bloody rag or a knife or something? There would be a high likelihood he could leave a trace that way. So I decided to get rid of those couple things. So like instead of washing his hands in the sink, I say he just uses like a dry shampoo that he doesn't wash his hands in the sink. And then instead of like, throwing his bloody clothes in a trash can nearby, he just changes his clothes. I don't know. I thought it'd just make sense because this guy is meant to be like a really competent assassin basically. So I thought those things were kind of like weak. Like you could leave a hair in the sink or you could just leave a bloody whatever a block away. That's pretty easy for police to find if they're competent. So I thought it was just kind of something to, get rid of. And then this line here, I kind of mentioned with the like as you know thing, is characters saying things that are really obvious. So Tessa here is in the hospital and she says she has a UTI, and Sam says, "What's a UTI?" And so she says, "Didn't you have sisters?" Well, Tessa knows that Samuel Creed has three sisters. So why would she say, "Didn't you have sisters?" She knows he has sisters. So instead, she just says, "You have sisters, period." She doesn't have to ask. It's like, hey, you have sisters. You should know what UTI is. And so he just says, I didn't or I don't attend their doctor's visits. So, yeah, just kind of a small thing, but I just don't like when characters say something that like is obvious, like didn't you have sisters? She knows he has sisters. She in fact just met one of them. I mean, not met one of them. One of them came over to the house just like a week ago, so she knows he has sisters. So if she wants to say, "Didn't you have sisters?" she just say, "You have sisters. You should know." It's a real small thing, but it's just sort of something that bothers me. Oh, and then this is just a little scene, I guess, for like, I don't know, personal experience or whatever. I just had a ultrasound a couple weeks ago because I have a hernia. So they did an ultrasound on it. And so one of the things the like sonographer or whatever did, is that what a person who does ultrasound is called? Well, it's what I call this person here, a sonographer. So it must be what they're called. But anyway, so when she came into the room, whatever, to do the ultrasound, the first thing she did was turned off the light. And I think the reason she did that is because it's like their way of trying to make you feel comfortable because they're doing the ultrasound kind of in a private place. So I think they turn off the light because that's their way of making the patient think like, oh, it's in the dark. I feel comfortable, because in the dark, you can't see as well. So the idea is, oh, don't worry. I turn off the light. I can't see you too well. I can't see your private parts. So it's just kind of a way to make the patient feel a little bit comfortable. So that is sort of something that I only discovered because I actually had an ultrasound myself. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to call it world building or whatever, but I guess like for people who have had an ultrasound before, so when this sonographer comes into the room and turns off the light, people who have had an ultrasound would be like, oh yeah, they do that, and they would realize like, oh yeah, that is realistic. I don't know. So I don't know if they would do that for like a pregnancy ultrasound, but I don't know. I just thought it's interesting that she did that the first thing she did was turn off the light. So yeah, when this sonographer comes into the room to give Tessa her ultrasound, that is the first thing she does is turn off the light. So I just wanted to add that, and I added it because I just had the ultrasound a week or two ago, and that's what happened. So I was like, oh, I should do that in my book. When the sonographer enters the room, she turns off the light. Okay, and this is kind of another problem I had with like the earlier drafts of the book is that oh, well, this is kind of a spoiler because they're talking about baby names. So I mean, Tessa is pregnant, and it's that is kind of a spoiler, but it's a really obvious spoiler because like on the back of the book it talks about like, Tessa is sick, so like does she have morning sickness? And the first line of the book is Tessa Holt threw up that morning and couldn't have been happier. So I mean it's pretty clear that Tessa's either pregnant or is going to be pregnant. So I mean it's really not much of a spoiler. It's kind of like the worst kept secret in the world, and in fact Tessa is like the last one kind of to figure out that she's pregnant. Like Samuel Creed already kind of knows she's pregnant and she's just kind of oblivious to it. But anyway, so they're talking about kids' names and stuff, and I didn't really explain in the original drafts of the book when they knew whether they were having a boy or a girl, and it was kind of like really abrupt where they have this scene here where they're talking about both boy and girl names, and then in a scene like just I don't know 10-15 pages later Tessa says that it's a boy. And I don't think she would have another ultrasound between now and then. So if she knows then that it's a boy, they should know now that it's a boy. So originally they were talking about boy and girl names, but if they know there's a boy, it's a boy. In fact, when they're looking at the ultrasound, they see that, it looks like the baby has a private part. So they're like, oh, that looks like a boy. So why would they then discuss girl names? And of course, the reason I have them discuss girl names is because they're also going to have several daughters later on. So it's kind of talking about potential names. Some of them, they're actually going to use. So you can kind of see the name coming together, how they choose the name. But since I changed it so they actually do see on the ultrasound that it's a boy, why would they discuss girl names? So instead, I added this line where Tessa kind of says, like, hey, what if the ultrasound is wrong? What if that was not a wing dang doodle? What if it is actually a girl? What should we call the baby? And really, like, kind of subtly, what Tessa is actually getting at is Tessa is quite a liberal. She's a leftist. She's a Democrat. And so, in fact, like later on in another book, in the next book, you'll see that she kind of likes dressing up her kid, like Asher, who's the boy, she dresses him in like more feminine clothing occasionally, and she'll dress him up in like girl colors like pink and everything, because that's just kind of how Tessa is. She's kind of a leftist, and she's pretty woke kind of. And there's even a part, like 10-15 pages later where, they ask if it's a boy or a girl, and Tessa says that she thinks the kid should decide, So that's how Tessa is. She thinks, well, if this baby is going to be a boy or a girl, whether, the baby or whatever, whether the child identifies as a boy or a girl, that is the child's choice. She doesn't really want to like force that choice onto the child. That's, just that's the way Tessa views it. And again, she also wants to dress her kids up in different colors. She just doesn't want to be like blue for boys, pink for girls. She is like, well, I want to dress them up in both. And so really, even though she's asking like, well, what if it does happen to be a girl, what Tessa is really getting at here is that, she is kind of thinking, well, I don't want to necessarily assume this is a boy just because of the ultrasound. Tessa's like, well, I still believe the child should decide what they are, whether they're a boy or a girl. So for naming the child, she doesn't really want to decidedly give the child a boy's name just because it's biologically a boy. So even though it's a boy on this some ultrasound, she is still thinking, well, maybe we'll give the child a girl's name. So it's not something I actually like expressly say in the book that that's why Tessa wants to talk about girl names, because she is considering like, even though this baby has a wing dang doodle, she could still want to name the baby Charlotte or Savannah or Grace or Meredith or whatever, because that's just how Tessa is. She just thinks, well, why should I name it a boy just because it has boy parts, So that is kind of why Tessa says, like, well, what about girl girl names, even though they know from the ultrasound it looks like a boy. That's how she frames it, is, well, just in the event that this is a girl, what should we name it? Because she also knows Samuel Creed, he's a pretty conservative Texas Republican, you know? So Samuel Creed is not going to go along so much with all of her stuff, you know? He is, you know, he's just going to be of the opinion that it's a boy. And he's going to give it a boy name, and he's going to dress it like a boy. He's not going to let Tessa dress his boy up in pink, even though, like, he kind of does wind up doing that, and they kind of fight over it a little bit. But Samuel Creed, he does kind of let her do that, you know? So, I mean, Asher in the next book, he does have, like, a pink shirt on because that's just how Tessa dresses him. And it talks about how, like, you know, he has changed Asher before, so like he'll change him into a blue shirt or whatever, and Tessa will immediately change him back. So it's kind of something he decided, like, I'm just not going to fight her on that. So he does kind of go along with her for that. But anyway, that's just a real long explanation. It's just sort of the backstory behind all this. So yeah, it's just sort of the characterization where Tessa's, you know, pretty liberal. So she says, you know, it's up to the child to decide what they are, if they want to be a boy or a girl or whatever. So that's just Tessa's personality. That's her character. And Samuel Creed is quite the opposite. Oh, and this is a real small detail, I guess, but originally in, I think, the first and second book in the series, it's kind of implied that Samuel Creed parks, like, alongside the building he works at, and it's described in the book that the building he works at is actually like the old Department of Labor building in Washington, D.C., a very real building. But now it's used for the Department of Homeland Security for SITE, the section for investigating terrorist events, where Samuel Creed works for. So he has like a very real life building he works at. But so in the original book, the first book and the second book, I think I have him park alongside the street, like alongside the building. But I was looking at Google Maps, and I don't think there is actually like street parking alongside that building, but there is a underground garage in that building. So instead, with this book, I talk about how he pulls into a garage beneath the Jordan Ray building. And also that name, Jordan Ray building, that is a student I went to school with, Jordan Ray. So it's just sort of a shout out to one of my classmates. And I like completely named that without his permission or approval or knowledge or whatever. I just did it for whatever reason. But yeah, so that's a kid I went to school with, Jordan Ray. I don't know why I chose him specifically. There is no reason whatsoever. It's just, you know, writers include things, you know, we use inspiration for everything. So yeah, Jordan Ray building, one of my classmates. So congratulations, Jordan, you're famous. You're in my books. And again, up there at the top, you could see I just changed it from 2 peer years theory to multiple peer years theory, just to be consistent. Oh, and I really like this scene. Vincent Peppers, who is named Pep in the book, he keeps quoting from Othello. So you'd come again and with a greedy ear devour up my discourse. What? Nothing, said Pep. And then, sit, but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for daws to peck at. I am not what I am. Are you drunk? Have you been smoking? So he's quoting Othello. So I don't know, it's just a neat little part of the scene I like. And there is a reason for it. Oh, so in a previous editing explained for Ottoman Destiny, I talk about how I do not know if this character, Mark, who is Samuel Creed's brother, I did not know if he is married or only dating. So here in this book, which is set before Ottoman Destiny, it says that Mark is actually married to his whatever girlfriend, whatever. Her name is Jada. They are married. But still, I'm not like totally sure if they should be married or not. I mean, I guess I could just go from this point on where they are married. You know, so this book is set in 2009. So canonically, I could just have it where Mark is married as of 2008. And so in Ottoman Destiny, I would know, since that's 2013, I believe, that they would be married. But I kind of decided to just keep it where they are still dating. So in this scene, I change it so it doesn't say Mark and his wife. And also later on, I talk about how they use a song from Mark's wedding, but I change it so he's not married. So instead, I changed it to Thomas's wedding. So anyway, I don't really know too much why I changed it to where he is only dating, but I don't know. It's just kind of confusing me, wondering whether he's married or whether he's only dating. So I kind of decided to change it so he's just dating. They are not married. Maybe they never get married. Just so that I'm not as confused whether they're married or not. And the reason I say why this is such a confusing thing for me is because I kind of jump around a little bit based on which series I'm working on. So this is the Samuel Creed series set in 2009. The Trevor Knight series is set in like 2013. So just trying to make sure it's consistent between the series, that they're not married in one book and then dating in another. So instead I just changed it to they're always dating. They pretty much never get married, I think. Oh my gosh, look at all this. What I have here is I talk about how this is Samuel Creed's wedding. I talk about how his sister Kate is a major character in the Trevor Knight series because she is kind of like Trevor Knight's love interest, where Kate is the best man at Sam's wedding. And so I had this line where Kate explains how she doesn't take the name best woman or best person. She just keeps it as best man. She is Sam's best man. And the reason is because if she has the name best woman or best person, people may think like, oh, that's nice. Well, who's your best man? So by keeping the name best man, it's clear that Kate is that role. So that's why I had this paragraph. But later on, just like whatever, 4 pages later, Kate actually says like, hi, I'm Sam's best man. And she says, you know, there's no one else. It's me. I am the best man. And so it's just kind of repetition. I did not need this whole paragraph because just in like 4 pages, Kate explains why she is the best man, not the best woman. She is the best man. She is that role. There is no one else. It is her. And again, in a real small way, it's just another way to kind of show more kind of my view of like, you know, the female power thing, where this role that traditionally goes to men, Sam gives it to his twin sister. And he has several brothers and he has several friends he could choose for his best man, but he chooses instead to have it be his sister. So it's sort of bucking tradition, even though Sam is a conservative and all that, you know, he's a Republican, so you'd figure he would be more of a conservative traditional person. But, you know, he's not in some ways. You know, he's perfectly fine giving this role to his twin sister, and he thinks there's really no one better for it. So it's sort of my way of having that sort of bucking tradition thing. And again, here you could see Mark's wife, Jada. I changed it to girlfriend. And yeah. Oh, and there at the bottom, Mark's wedding, changed it to Thomas's wedding. Use of the word was, kind of hinting at possible passive sentences. Assembled before him was a large gathering, was kind of tips off that it could be passive. So instead, a large gathering of the president's national security, whatever. Oh my gosh, look at that at the bottom. So again, I think that stuff on the right is carrying on from the previous page. So yeah, I just didn't have room for it. Oh, and actually I kind of wanted to talk about this, why I have this. So what happens here is Samuel Creed is giving a briefing to the president about Iran basically conducts a terrorist attack or even a military attack, I don't know what you want to call it, on the United States on Miami. They do that in German Derelict. Well, this is set just at the same time because German Derelict is set in 2009 and this book is also set in 2009. So it happens at the same time. So anyway, so Samuel Creed goes to give this presidential briefing about this attack in Miami, which again is from German Derelict. That happens in German Derelict. But my books are part of a shared living universe, which means that events in one book and one series affect other books and other series as well. So for instance, if Portugal is conquered in one book, they are also conquered in a completely different book. If one city is nuked in one book, then in the other book, that city is also still nuked. But anyway, so Samuel Creed goes to give this presidential briefing, and the president kind of asks him, like, what do you think we should do about Iran? How should we respond to this? And Samuel Creed, throughout this book, he's been kind of more, a little bit militaristic. You know, he wants to fight terrorists. He wants to be more aggressive. But here, the president asks him, what should we do about Iran? How should we respond to this? You know, kind of like, should we invade Iran? And it's clear in the other books that there is no massive war against Iran. And it's sort of something, you know, again, I regret about German Derelict because I just hate that plot. So it's just not explained like that event, that terrorist attack or whatever, military attack, whatever it is, in Miami should have been the result of a war. We should have invaded Iran over that, but we did not. Why? And so this is kind of a little bit of a scene where Samuel Creed, he's asked what we should do about this, and he kind of realizes, hey, I may have policy that I would personally want, but tens or hundreds of thousands of lives or even millions of lives are at stake here. So Samuel Creed really kind of realizes, like, I need to be really careful here. I could start a war. And this is something about Samuel Creed's character that differs him from Trevor Knight, my other character. Trevor Knight is a lot more impulsive, where Trevor Knight will cause more problems, whether he wants to do the right thing or not. He is a bit more reckless. He's not as thoughtful. But Samuel Creed here, he realizes, like, hey, I could be responsible for there being a war here. Hundreds of thousands of lives could be extinguished based on my choice here. And so at first he tries to tell the president, like, hey, it's not my job to, advise you. I'm not, whatever. And the president says, like, hey, I still want your advice. I need your advice. I want to know all my options. And so here at the bottom, Samuel Creed kind of explains why he thinks we should not respond militarily to what happened in Miami. And he adds, like, all these reasons why we should not go to war with Iran. And, it's really clear that he's trying to give the president good advice. Even though he does not like the president and he disagrees with him, and he wants the president to be more aggressive in fighting terrorism and stuff. But he also knows, hey, I do not want to be responsible for this war just because I want a war and I want, I want more action against terrorists. Samuel Creed is a real thoughtful person. He is a smart guy. He fought in Afghanistan himself, so he has seen the result of war. So he knows what war brings. He knows that wars do not play out the way you want them to. So here at the bottom, he basically tells the president, like, hey, I don't think this is worth a war. Only like a couple people died, most of them just from the panic of the attack. The actual attack did very little damage. It's more like all the damage is more self-inflicted. So I think Samuel Creed says there are other ways to respond here. We could respond economically. We could respond diplomatically. We could respond with intelligence, like covert stuff. But in terms of like actually sending the whole army there to invade Iran when we're already still at war with Afghanistan, we're still in Iraq, I do not think we should invade Iran at this point. I do not think that is a good idea. I do not think that is a way to keep the country safe. So I think there are other options instead of a war. And so that's what Samuel Creed talks about here. And I like it because it just shows his character. He's not just going to launch a war just because. He knows hundreds of thousands of lives hang in the balance here, and he's going to try to give the president good advice. So I just really like it. And again, it also kind of serves to explain why there was no war in response to this. And right here, because Samuel Creed says, like, hey, this attack was really a minor thing. I do not think it is worth a war. We're going to lose far more people in a war than we would if we just responded some other way. So I think there are other choices how to respond to this. And that's what the president does. He responds differently than just launching a war. So that explains why there is no war as a response to this attack in Miami. So it's kind of a little bit of a plot hole in German Derelict where I just didn't really explain what happens because of this attack. What's the response to this attack? So here you actually get to see why there was no war as a response to this. So it's sort of in a small way kind of fixing German Derelict because, again, I just do not like that book. I hate it. So it's kind of explaining here why there was no war. This little scene, it shows kind of throughout this scene and a little bit later in the book, this character Spencer West continually calls this other character David or James because he's like always getting his name wrong, because part of the idea is Spencer West, he's really kind of an a-hole character, so he's always getting this guy's name wrong. But then I actually realized, like, he keeps calling him David. This character, his name is Josiah Holloway. His middle name actually is David. So I don't think I really realized that when I was writing this. I knew his name was Josiah, of course, but I think what I originally thought was I was either going to call him Josiah or David, but instead I chose to call him Josiah. I was like, okay, well, Spencer will call him David, but the guy's middle name is actually David. So I decided to change it so he calls him Frank instead of David or James. He just keeps calling him Frank because that is like, there is no way that is this guy's name, Josiah David Holloway, but he keeps calling him Frank. So yeah, it's just sort of a mistake, him calling him David when David was actually his middle name. Oh my goodness, look at all this. So what happened here, originally, they're in Nigeria and they're about to, go to war kind of with Boko Haram. And so Samuel Creed is, there's this other character, Marcy, who's, kind of his friend and colleague. He kind of originally talked like, hey, if I happen to not make it home, can you take care of Tessa and my kid for me, is kind of what he was originally going to say. But I thought it was really kind of weak and also just a cliche like, hey, take care of my wife and kid for me. It's like, why would that be her responsibility, That is a lot of pressure to just put on someone like, hey, take care of my wife and kid if I die. Like, don't you know how much responsibility that is? And, shouldn't you have thought of someone else to take care of this? Like, in the event you die, like, someone else is actually going to step in to take care, not just like, oh, someone at work, like, hey, if I die, help my wife out. So like Samuel Creed and Tessa have already like talked about like if he dies, how she's going to be taken care of. So basically, he would not have this conversation with Marcy saying like, "Hey, take care of Tessa and my kid if I die." That would never happen. He wouldn't put that responsibility on her. It's not her job. So instead, he just has this line where instead of saying that like, "Hey, take care of Tessa," what he says is just like, "Hey, if I happen to not make it back," and she's like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll make it back," because she thinks that's what he's going to say is like, "Oh, take care of my kid for me." But instead, all he says is like, "No, no, no, just listen to me." And what he says is, if I don't make it back, don't let Spencer, date my wife or whatever. Don't let him get close to Tessa. And so Marcy just says, essentially like, oh, okay, I'll just kill Spencer if, I see him trying anything with Tessa. So just kind of a small thing. I think it's kind of funny. Where, again, Spencer is kind of an a-hole character and he's really kind of sexist to this character Marcy. He's always kind of making like sexual harassment comments about her. Really, he should get fired for this. But Marcy, she's kind of like, it doesn't really bother her too much. But anyway, so Samuel Creed just tells her like, hey, if I die, if I don't make it home, kill Spencer. And so she's just like, okay. I think it's just better than him saying like, hey, take care of my kid for me. That's just so much responsibility to put on someone. So instead, he just says, hey, if I die, kill Spencer if he tries anything. She says, okay, will do. First off, sort of middle top there, I began to think, just make it more concise, I thought. But anyway, what I wanted to show here is there's this scene here where these two characters, Spencer West and David Holloway, where they have a scene together. And I think it's really good because I think having scenes with characters who don't usually have a lot of scenes together is a great way to further develop characters, whether that rather than just having the main character Samuel Creed meet with each character, having characters meet different characters. So Spencer West and David Holloway having a scene together. These two characters who otherwise don't have mini scenes, except with Sam. It's a way for them to kind of show a different side of their characters. So here, Spencer West and David Holloway have a scene together where they're kind of talking about like their fathers and their family life and, their whatever, their youth, their thoughts on their job, whether they're satisfied with life and all that. Those are not conversations so much that Samuel Creed has with these characters, just because for whatever reason, they don't really mesh that way. But when these two characters meet, Spencer West and David Holloway, or not David Holloway, Josiah Holloway, it's a way to kind of flesh out both characters and get a different view of both characters. So Spencer West, throughout the series, this is the third book, Spencer West has always kind of been an a-hole and you haven't really gotten to know him very much as a person, to empathize with him, to know where he comes from, to really know his backstory, to really even like the dude. He's been pretty unlikable. But here he has a scene with Josiah where these two actually have kind of a real intimate conversation where they're kind of getting to know each other and understand where each other is coming from and all that. So I think it's a real good way to further flesh out characters. So as a piece of advice for other writers, I would say if you want to develop characters, try having characters who don't ordinarily meet and have a scene together, and just how would those characters interact? How would they relate? What new information could you learn about those characters that you would not learn from other characters? So like in this case, Spencer West has not ever opened up to anyone, but with this guy Josiah, they have a conversation and they talk about things. You learn things about Spencer West that you don't learn any other way else. So it's a way to, humanize him as a character and to further develop him. And the way you do that is by also developing another character. So I really like it. It's a way to, develop two characters at once that otherwise wouldn't get developed as well. Oh, and then there's this line here, Sanny left. There's also another character named Sanny earlier in the book who is like a warlord who runs this camp with the kidnapped girls, a really bad character. But I realized, like, hang on, Sanny. I thought I had another character named that. So I do. They're both named Sanny. So I was kind of worried having this one character here, even though they are completely different characters. I was worried if readers, see two characters with the same name, they would think, oh, this is the warlord. This is the bad character. He's secretly working with Boko Haram. He's a bad character. But he's not. That was a different character. So instead, I changed the name of the previous character. Now, I've already done that. So I word searched for the name Sanny. And so I changed all of the camp warlord character to a different name than this guy, just so the readers aren't confused, thinking this guy is the warlord. He's not. This is a completely different character. Here I have this scene where Samuel Creed is actually imitating or whatever. He's pretending to be this weapons dealer and he meets with this terrorist group. And so this other group is kind of hey, are you working with Boko Haram? And they know Boko Haram kidnapped all these girls. So originally, these characters, this other terrorist group is all black characters because this is Africa. So originally Samuel Creed was talking I deplore dealing in enslaved girls, and then he talks about superior and as an African and a black man he should not dishonor himself by enslaving Africans and black girls. So kind of throughout the scene Samuel Creed is kind of saying I don't like slavery, especially black slavery, and I don't like that he's doing this to black girls. I thought it was really kind of patronizing in a way, just continually saying oh, I don't like that he's doing this to black girls, and oh, those poor black girls. Why would he really be specifying black girls to this African tribal warlord guy? It just seemed very kind of fake. Why specifically say black girls? Why not just all girls? Why say black slavery? Why not just say slavery? So I kind of wanted to get rid of those. So it just says he abhors slavery and so on. So yeah, just something I kind of wanted to get rid of because it just felt really kind of patronizing. Oh yeah, I hate black slavery. It's are you okay with white slavery then? And whatever. So I was just kind of wanting to change up his wording here. Oh, and this is actually something I got from a book at the bookstore. So I was just reading some Islamic or Arabic language thing and just kind of flipping through it. And one of the things I read is that there's a word in Arabic for envy. Then I think I was reading maybe another book as well about there's an Arabic word for envy, and then this book, which was talking about Islam, was talking about how there is envy that's a sin, but then there's also envy that is justified. And so what it said in that book is that it is okay to feel envious for people who have memorized the Quran. That is that's okay. That's not a sin to see someone who has memorized the Quran and be kind of jealous of them and envious of them, oh man, I wish I could do that. That is fine. That's not a sin. That's what I read in the book. So in this part here, this character, this warlord, he quotes the Quran because he's kind of not trusting Samuel Creed because this white guy kind of shows up out of the blue wanting to sell him stuff. And so he quotes the Quran, and Samuel Creed immediately quotes it back to him the next verse, because it's established in the series that Samuel Creed has really good memory. Samuel Creed has pretty much memorized the Quran. So he quotes the Quran back to this guy, and that kind of lets that guy know, oh, this guy seems legit. He was memorized the Quran. I haven't even done that. So this guy says, this warlord says, hey, I'm not exactly happy that you memorized the Quran because now you made me sin because now I envy you. And so since I read that thing about, the envy thing, I decided to add this scene where Samuel Creed says, "Oh, don't worry, it's okay to envy people who have memorized the Quran. That is not a sin to envy in that case. That is justified envy." So I just really like it. It's a really small bit of world building where Samuel Creed says that's a good, kind of hasad. That's a good kind of envy. Just, really kind of detailed thing, like, world building, like, oh, I would have never known that, like, in Islam, it is okay to feel envious of people who have memorized the Quran. So that's only something I learned about because I, flipped through that book on Islam. So as much as possible, I like having details like that because it just adds a little bit of realism to it. Oh, actually, back to this image real quick. I showed this image earlier in the video, but I didn't talk about it because there's so much red ink. I didn't think there was anything here to talk about, but there actually is. What I did here is I added some detail about the character Ajamu Puryear, the villain. I tried to establish in the book that Puryear is basically a genius. He has genius level intellect, and I say in a few parts that Samuel Creed watches several of his videos. And when the dude talks about Islam, he actually gives some really fascinating kind of sermons or lectures to kind of show that this guy, this warlord, is actually a brilliant dude. And so I decided to add this whole section here, pretty much all on the left, where it talks about one of the sermons or lectures that Puryear gave. Puryear condemns suicide attacks. And the reason he says is because a lot of people commit suicide attacks because they have been told, like, if you do a suicide attack you'll be rewarded in heaven with virgins and stuff. And so what Puryear says is that that is a selfish reason to commit martyrdom, and the only reason anyone should ever commit martyrdom is for the sake of Allah, for the sake of God. But when you commit martyrdom because you want to be rewarded with virgins in heaven, that is a deeply selfish reason to kill yourself. So why should you get rewarded when you are doing something for your own benefit, not for God's benefit? So Puryear condemns suicide attacks, which I think is really interesting because, I mean, Puryear is like a thoroughly bad dude, but here he is actually giving like a real persuasive argument or whatever, a real passionate argument that suicide attacks are not largely justified. And he also goes on to say, like, a lot of reason these people commit suicide attacks is not at all really because of religion, but because they are like economically poor, young, lonely men. They're unmarried men. They're desperate. They just think, oh, well, I could at least get laid in heaven. And they really have nothing to live for. So what he kind of talks about is that, those people need to have other opportunity. They need to get a job, they need to find a wife, and they need to also, father children. And because if they father children, then they could raise those children to become Muslims, and then they will grow the faith that way. But instead, if they just kill themselves when they're 20 years old and they never become a father or anything, they don't reproduce, and Islam does not spread. So that's basically what this sermon is, or lecture is, that Puryear delivers. And so it's one reason why Samuel Creed listens to him and thinks, like, man, this is actually a really good argument this guy is making, even though he's this really despicable warlord. So I will not say that it makes him morally gray, because that's not at all like the intent. I mean, this character is meant to be like purely bad, but that doesn't mean he has to just be like a fanatical, like, ooh, yes, I love suicide attacks. This guy is a deeply religious dude. So he actually says, like, hey, all these suicide attacks are not right. People are doing them for their own selfish reasons, and there's other reasons they do it, like economic desperation, loneliness, and so on. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in here. I didn't do it in the regular video, and I just realized it now, so I wanted to add that. So it's just a part of his character I really like. And in a small, small way, it's one of the ways that Samuel Creed can actually kind of respect this dude. And that's part of Samuel Creed's character, is he wants to know and understand his enemy. And so this is actually like an address by Puryear that Samuel Creed is like, man, this is actually some pretty good stuff. This guy is saying some pretty good points. Oh, and this isn't an edit, but this is just something to show for like characterization, where they've mapped out these sites where Boko Haram is moving trucks through these different routes, like moving kidnapped girls out of the country. And so in this scene here, like two trucks are going one way, one route, and other trucks are going another route. And so Samuel Creed immediately says, "We stay on Alpha." Creed decided it once. Pep said, "But the third and fourth truck," and Creed repeated, "We stay on Alpha." So this is Creed making a decision like, no, he is taking leadership. He is leading this team. And it's kind of a little bit odd because, again, Samuel Creed is kind of the newer guy for this agency or whatever. I mean, he's been working there for a couple years now, but you kind of wonder, why isn't one of the other people leading this team when they have more seniority than he does? And kind of the reason why is because Samuel Creed was in the military before. And so Samuel Creed is kind of used to being a leader, having leadership roles. And part of being a leader is that there are times when he will listen to what the group thinks, but there are other times when the leader has to make a decision, where the leader just puts his foot down and says, "No, we are doing this. Everyone get behind me. This is the plan." And so that's what he does here. And, I don't explain like, all of that to explain like, oh, Sam says this because he is a leader. He does this just because he is a leader. This shows why he is a leader. He makes a decision unilaterally. He doesn't ask the group what they should do. This is not a time to be democratic and say like, oh, what should we do, guys? Do we go after this truck or that truck, or do we split the team or whatever? Samuel Creed just immediately on the spot, he says, "We're staying on Alpha. We are staying on this route. We are staying on these trucks. Forget about those other ones. We're doing this." And this other character, tries to be democratic, but, the third and fourth, he puts his foot down. He says, "No, we're doing this." He takes the lead. He is making the decision. Everyone else, get behind him. That is why Samuel Creed is a leader. He will defer to the group sometimes. He'll want input from the group sometimes. But in this case, he is a leader. He is making the decision. Everyone else get behind him. This is the plan. We're sticking to it. Oh my freaking gosh, look at all of that. I'm definitely not going through all of that. And more. So the stuff on the top left of the page is from the previous page carried over. Then you can see I drew a line to the bottom of the page. So there's even more that will also go on that previous page. So I just didn't have room for it. So that's a lot of edits. Basically rewriting a lot of that chapter. And earlier in this video, I talk about how there are like 2 or 3 scenes I want to add to Keeping Fire, but unfortunately, I forget what those scenes were. I said there are 2 or 3 scenes I wanted to add. I only remembered one of them. So I have this note here, add a scene of Creed and the other site workers thanking Pep for his work. So that is one of the few scenes I wanted to add. I forget, though, what the other scene or 2 I was supposed to add were. So yeah, that kind of sucks. I wish I would have like left a note saying like what the other scene I wanted to add was, because I forget. I do not remember what the other scene I was supposed to add was. And I've already written this, even though this is much later in the book. I went ahead and actually wrote this scene into the book, into the computer. So this scene does exist now, and I really like it. Oh, and that's actually the end of the book. So right here at the end, I wrote down sneak peek of Keeping Tessa. I do that in the Trevor Knight books where it's, a sneak peek of the next book. So I just thought, hey, why not do that for Keeping Tessa? Just have the first chapter of Keeping Tessa at the end of this book. And then I also thought I should add a cast of characters, because right now the cast of characters is kind of getting a little bit long, because this is the 3rd book. So, each book tends to add a few characters. So I think it's about time where I think I need to add a cast of characters, because now there are probably like, 30 characters or so in the book. So I think it'd be good to add a cast of characters. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to all my rambling. Bye.
2, 3, 4.